The first time I realized my life was being rewritten without my consent, it wasn't shouted. It was whispered, casually, like an afterthought. She won't notice the change. She never reads the fine print anyway. I was standing on the back staircase of the house I paid for, one hand on the railing, the other holding a basket of clean towels that smelled faintly of lemon detergent. The voice belonged to my nephew, Aaron. The reply came from my daughter, Melissa. Calm, certain, final. I am 62 years old. My name is Claire Hargreave. I live in a coastal town outside Savannah, Georgia, where the humidity clings to your skin and secrets linger longer than storms. I have lived in this house for 29 years. I raised a child here. I buried a husband here. I rebuilt myself here. And apparently, I had become a detail to be edited out. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The towels grew heavier in my arms as Melissa continued speaking. It's temporary, she said, just until everything's settled. She's emotional right now, ever since the surgery. The surgery. My knee replacement, 6 weeks ago. The one I walked into and out of on my own. Aaron chuckled. Mom always said she was sentimental, not smart. Something inside me went very quiet. I stepped backward, slow enough not to make the stairs creak, and returned to the laundry room. I folded the towels with precision. Corners aligned, edges sharp. Muscle memory from years of doing everything right, so no one could accuse me of doing anything wrong. That evening, Melissa kissed my cheek before leaving for dinner with friends. She smelled like expensive perfume and impatience. You okay, Mom? She asked, already halfway out the door. I'm fine, I said. She smiled with relief. That smile told me everything. After she left, I opened the drawer in my home office where I kept paperwork I rarely touched. Deeds, insurance policies, bank statements. The boring scaffolding of a life built carefully, quietly. That was when I noticed it. A new folder, thin, white, labeled Estate Planning Update. My name was on it. So was Melissa's. I sat down slowly, the leather chair cold against my legs. Inside were copies of documents I did not remember signing. Not because my memory was failing, but because the signatures were wrong. Close, but wrong. Like someone trying to imitate my handwriting without understanding the rhythm of it. My heart didn't race. It hardened. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't concern. This was betrayal. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next day. I watched instead. I listened. I learned. I noticed how Melissa began volunteering to help with my mail. How Aaron suddenly took an interest in my finances. How casual conversations slipped in about downsizing, about legacy, about how hard it was for younger generations to get ahead. I smiled. I nodded. I played my part. Because what they didn't know was this. Before I married my late husband Thomas, I worked in corporate compliance. 20 years of contracts, loopholes, risk management. I had spent a lifetime learning how people hide their intentions behind polite language. They thought age had erased that. They were wrong. And as I sat alone in my kitchen that night, the cicadas humming outside, I asked myself a single question. If they were already planning my ending, what would happen if I rewrote the middle? I closed the folder, locked it in the drawer, and reached for my phone. It was time to make a call they would never see coming. The lawyer's name was Rebecca Sloan, and she didn't waste time pretending this was a misunderstanding. This is coordinated, she said, adjusting her glasses as she spread the documents across her desk. Sloppy, but intentional. We were sitting in her office overlooking the river, sunlight bouncing off the water and into the room like it had something to say. I had chosen her because she specialized in elder financial abuse cases. I told Melissa I was meeting a friend for lunch. Technically, I wasn't lying. They think I'm weak, I said quietly. Rebecca looked up. They think you convenient. She explained my options with calm precision. Affidavits, forensic handwriting analysis, asset freezes, trust restructuring. The words didn't scare me. They steadied me. What would you do, I asked, if this were your mother? She leaned back. I'd make sure she was untouchable before they realized they'd been seen. That was when the plan shifted from defense to strategy. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives. One visible, one invisible. In the visible one, I attended Melissa's dinner parties. I laughed at Aaron's jokes. I complained about my knee when it suited me. I let them believe I was drifting. In the invisible one, I moved money. Quietly. Legally. I restructured my assets into a revocable trust with conditions no one would discover until it was too late to challenge them. I recorded a competency statement on video. I updated my will with surgical clarity. Melissa grew more confident as I grew quieter. One afternoon, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around her coffee mug. "Aaron mentioned something interesting," she said lightly. "About the house." I raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "Have you ever thought about putting it in both our names?" she asked. "Just in case." "In case," I smiled. "Why would I do that?" She hesitated, then recovered. For simplicity, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart," I said, "everything doesn't need to be simple." That night, I overheard her on the phone again. Different tone this time. Tense. "She's stalling," Melissa said. "I don't like it." "Good." Rebecca called me the next morning. "They filed an inquiry," she said. "Not formal yet. They're testing the water." "Then it's time," I replied. 2 days later, I listed the house. Not publicly. Quietly. Through a private network of cash buyers Rebecca trusted. I signed the papers in a conference room that smelled like coffee and resolve. I didn't pack everything. Just what mattered. Letters, photos, the watch Thomas wore every day of our marriage. I left the rest behind, like a stage set. Melissa discovered the listing by accident. I know because she burst into my temporary rental that evening, eyes wide, breath sharp. "What did you do?" she demanded. I looked at her calmly. I made a decision. "You can't," she said. "You didn't talk to me." I stood up, steady on my new knee, and met her gaze. "That," I said, "was your first mistake." Behind her, Aaron stood frozen, his confidence evaporating. They had assumed I would ask permission. They had assumed wrong. And as Melissa reached for her phone, panic finally cracking her composure, I realized something important. This was no longer about protecting myself. This was about letting the truth unfold at a speed they could not control. And the next move would change everything. Melissa cried in my rental kitchen that night. Not softly, not privately. She cried the way people do when control slips through their fingers and they don't yet know what to replace it with. Her mascara streaked, her voice cracked. Aaron hovered behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes calculating. "You're overreacting," he said. "No one was trying to hurt you." I leaned against the counter, arms folded, and watched them like strangers who had wandered into the wrong house. "Hurt isn't always loud," I said. "Sometimes it's paperwork." Melissa wiped her face angrily. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You always do that when you feel threatened." "Threatened." I laughed once. Short, dry. "You forged documents," I said. "You intercepted my mail. You discussed my finances like I was already gone." Aaron scoffed. "We were planning. That's what families do." "No," I replied. "That's what predators do when they think the prey is tired." The word landed harder than I expected. Melissa flinched. She tried another angle. "Mom, please, think about your legacy. Think about your granddaughter." There it was. The lever she had always used. I felt the old reflex twitch in my chest. The instinct to fold. To apologize for taking up space. To sacrifice clarity for peace. I let it pass. "My legacy," I said slowly, "is not your convenience." Silence filled the room. Thick. Uncomfortable. Aaron stepped forward. "You don't understand the consequences," he said. "You sell that house, you disrupt everything." "I know," I said. "That's the point." Melissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me, eyes narrowing. "Who else knows?" I smiled. Enough people. That was the moment fear replaced anger. They left shortly after, without hugs, without apologies. Aaron muttered something about lawyers. Melissa didn't look back. When the door closed, my knees trembled. I sat down hard at the table and pressed my palms flat against the wood, grounding myself in something solid. This wasn't easy. It wasn't cinematic. It was lonely and terrifying and right. Rebecca called me later that night. "They're scrambling," she said. "They tried to freeze the sale." "Did it work?" "No," she said. "They don't have standing." "Good." The next morning, I woke up to messages from extended family. cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, an aunt who suddenly cared deeply about my well-being. Concern traveled fast when money was involved. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the house one last time. It was empty. Quiet. Sunlight spilled across the floors I had scrubbed on my hands and knees. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the door frames, the banister Thomas built himself. In the bedroom, I found something unexpected. A notebook tucked into the nightstand drawer. Melissa's handwriting. Notes, lists, timelines. Cell house, medical review, power of attorney. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. They hadn't just planned to help me. They had planned to replace me. I took the notebook and locked it in my bag. As I left, I turned back once, not to grieve, but to remember. Because grief blurs things, memory sharpens them, and I would need sharpness for what came next. The sale closed faster than anyone expected. 7 days. All cash. No contingencies. The morning Rebecca called to confirm the funds had cleared, I was sitting on the balcony of my rental, watching shrimp boats move slowly across the water. The air smelled like salt and freedom. "It's done," she said. "They can't touch it." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt nothing. Then relief crashed into me so hard I had to grip the chair. By noon, Melissa knew. She called repeatedly, texted, left voicemails that swung wildly between rage and pleading. "You've ruined us," she cried in one. "You don't understand what you've done," she hissed in another. "Please, Mom, call me," she whispered last. I turned my phone off. That afternoon, Aaron made his move. Rebecca forwarded me an email marked urgent. Emergency petition for financial conservatorship, filed that morning. Claims of cognitive decline. Allegations of undue influence. I read it slowly. They weren't done. "They're desperate," Rebecca said over the phone, "which makes them reckless." "What happens next?" I asked. "A hearing," she said. "And discovery." Discovery. The word tasted like justice. Over the next weeks, everything came out. The forged signatures, the intercepted mail, the emails between Melissa and Aaron discussing my health like a liability. The notebook. The judge, a woman not much younger than me, listened carefully, asked sharp questions, took notes. Melissa cried again, this time in public. Aaron didn't speak at all. When the ruling came, it was decisive. Petition denied. Evidence of manipulation noted. Warning issued. Rebecca squeezed my hand. "You're free." Outside the courthouse, Melissa approached me, eyes red, voice trembling. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "No," I replied quietly. "You were trying to protect your future." She stared at me, stunned. "That future," I continued, "was built on my disappearance." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had nothing left to say. That night, back at my rental, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark, listening to the waves. I thought about the girl I used to be, the woman I became, the one I was still becoming. This wasn't revenge in the way movies sold it. This was reclamation. And as calm settled over me, I understood something important. The hardest part wasn't fighting them. It was letting go of who I used to be for them. And that, I knew, was only the beginning. Freedom has an echo. I didn't expect that. I thought once the house sold, once the court slammed the door on their attempt to control me, everything would go quiet, peaceful, clean. Instead, the silence amplified everything I had ignored for years. I woke up the first morning after the hearing with my heart racing, convinced I'd forgotten something important. A bill unpaid, a call unreturned, someone disappointed. There was no one. I made coffee and stood barefoot on the cool tile, staring at the river. The money from the sale sat safely where Melissa and Aaron could never reach it. Structured, protected, boring in the best possible way. I was financially secure for the first time in my life without anyone else attached to it, and yet my chest felt tight. That was when the rumors started. A former neighbor texted to ask if I was okay. A distant cousin posted vague concerns online about elder neglect. Melissa's version of events had begun circulating, polished and tearful. I was unstable, influenced, cold. Rebecca warned me this would happen. When people lose control, she said, they try to control the story. I considered staying quiet, letting it pass. Then I received an email from the board of the local historical foundation where I volunteered. Claire, given recent concerns raised by your family, we feel it may be appropriate for you to take a temporary leave. Temporary. Appropriate. Raised. My hands shook as I read it. Melissa hadn't just tried to take my house. She was trying to erase my credibility. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed moments from the past, seeing them clearly for the first time. How often Melissa spoke for me. How Aaron dismissed my opinions. How my competence had been slowly replaced by a narrative of fragility. I opened my laptop and began writing. Not an email, a timeline. Every incident, every document, every conversation I could remember. Dates, names, screenshots. I attached the court ruling, the forensic report, the judge's warning. The next morning, I sent it to the foundation and to 3 other places where my name still mattered. I didn't add commentary. I let facts speak. By the end of the week, apologies arrived. Quiet ones. Embarrassed ones, Melissa noticed. She showed up at my door, unannounced, eyes sharp, voice controlled. "You're poisoning people against me," she said. "I'm correcting the record," I replied. "You don't have to destroy everything," she snapped. I looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't destroy it," I said. "I stopped protecting it." She stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. "Mom," she said slowly, "do you know what people are saying about you?" I nodded. That I finally stood up for myself. Her mouth twisted. "They're saying you're vindictive," I smiled. "Only the people who benefited from my silence." She left, furious. That night, Rebecca called again. "There's something else," she said. "Aaron's employer reached out." My pulse quickened. "Why?" "He listed you as a reference," she said, "for a promotion." I laughed out loud. It surprised both of us. "He really doesn't understand," I said. "No," Rebecca agreed. "He doesn't." I slept better that night. Not peacefully, but with purpose. Because I understood now. This wasn't just about defending myself. It was about reclaiming my voice in every place I had been gently pushed aside. And once reclaimed, it was not something I intended to lend out again. Aaron called 3 days later. His tone was different. Measured. Careful. "Claire," he said, using my name like it was a negotiation chip. "We should talk." "I don't think so," I replied. "I'm trying to fix things," he said. "This spiral doesn't help anyone." I leaned back in my chair, watching the late afternoon sun slide across the floor. "You're not trying to fix things," I said. "You're trying to minimize damage." A pause, then a sigh. "You're being emotional," he said. I smiled. That word used to stop me cold. Not anymore. "Send me the request in writing," I said, "if it's legitimate." He hung up. That evening, I received an email from his company's compliance department. Formal, polite, requesting confirmation of my professional interactions with Aaron over the past 5 years. They had questions. I answered them honestly. I described overheard conversations, financial discussions that crossed ethical lines, his casual admission of moving money temporarily, his expectation that I would clean up his messes quietly, like I always had. I didn't accuse. I documented. 2 weeks later, his promotion was put on hold, pending internal review. Melissa exploded. She called screaming, voice cracking with rage. "You're doing this on purpose!" "No," I said calmly. I stopped preventing consequences. "You're ruining my marriage!" she shouted. She sobbed then. Real sobs, not strategic ones. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered. I felt a flicker of sadness. "Neither did you," I replied. That weekend, I drove north to a small mountain town and signed a lease on a cottage with a wraparound porch and no memories attached to it. I bought new furniture, neutral colors, nothing inherited. I introduced myself to neighbors as Claire, not mom, not widow, just Claire. I joined a walking group, a book club. I told my story selectively, carefully, without shame. One afternoon, while unpacking the last box, I found the notebook Melissa had hidden in my old house. I flipped through it again, slower this time. I realized something I hadn't before. They never once asked what I wanted. They assumed. That assumption had cost them everything. As I placed the notebook in a drawer labeled Past, my phone buzzed with the final message from Aaron. "This isn't over." I looked out at the trees, the sky wide and unbothered. No, I thought. For you, it's just beginning. For me, it already ended. And that difference would define everything that came next. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, slipped under my door like an accusation. No return address, just my name, written carefully, deliberately, as if the writer wanted to be recognized for restraint. Inside was a formal notice. Aaron's company had opened a full compliance investigation. He was being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. The tone was neutral, almost gentle, but the implication was sharp. I sat at my small kitchen table, the kettle cooling beside me, and read it twice. I hadn't filed a complaint. I hadn't needed to. I thought back to all the times I had overheard Aaron bragging about shortcuts, about temporary reallocations, about how rules were flexible if you knew the right people. I remembered how he spoke differently when he thought no one important was listening. He had assumed I wasn't important. That afternoon, Melissa showed up again. She looked smaller this time, thinner. Her confidence no longer filled the room before she did. She stood just inside the doorway, hands clasped, eyes darting like she was measuring exits. "They're saying he might be charged," she said quietly. I didn't respond. "You did this," she continued, voice shaking. "You wanted this." I walked past her and poured myself a glass of water. My movements were slow, deliberate. I wanted her to see that I wasn't panicked. "I wanted the truth," I said. "This is what it looks like." She sank into a chair. "He's my husband." "And I'm your mother," I replied. "Or I was, when it suited you." She flinched. "I didn't know it would go this far," she whispered. I finally looked at her then. Really looked. The dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the weight of choices she could no longer rewrite. "You knew enough," I said. "You knew what you were doing to me." Tears slid down her face, unguarded now. "I was scared," she said. "Everyone around me was moving forward. Promotions, bigger houses, kids. And I was behind." "So you decided to stand on me," I said softly. She didn't deny it. That was the moment something inside me loosened. Not forgiveness. Clarity. "You need to leave," I said. She looked up sharply. "You're cutting me off." "No," I replied. "I'm cutting the pattern." She left without another word. 2 days later, Rebecca called with an update. "They're digging deep," she said, "and they don't like what they're finding." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the porch railing, the mountain air cool against my skin. "What about me?" I asked. "You're clean," she said, "but they're asking if you'd be willing to testify if it goes criminal." I didn't answer right away. That night, I dreamed of the house by the river. Not as it was, but as it could have been if I'd stayed. Me shrinking, them expanding. I woke before dawn with a decision settled in my chest. The next morning, I called Rebecca back. "I'll testify," I said, if asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I replied. "I'm done protecting people who tried to erase me." That afternoon, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Aaron. "You think you've won," it read. "You have no idea what you've started." I deleted it. But the chill that ran through me told me he was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. The subpoena arrived a week later. Thick envelope, heavy paper, my name printed in bold. The weight of it settled in my hands like something alive. I was being called as a witness, not in a family matter, in a criminal one. I sat on the porch steps, the envelope resting on my knee, and listened to the wind move through the trees. For the first time since this all began, fear crept in. Not the old fear of disappointing someone. This was different. This was visibility. At the courthouse, the air felt colder than it should have. Aaron sat at the defense table, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched. He didn't look at me. Melissa sat behind him, smaller still, folded in on herself. When I took the stand, my hands trembled briefly. I placed them flat on the wood and waited. The prosecutor's voice was calm, methodical. She asked about timelines, conversations, what I had heard, what I had seen. I answered carefully, truthfully. I didn't embellish. I didn't soften. When she asked about the forged documents, I described the moment I found them, the feeling of realizing my life had been reduced to a line item. When she asked why I hadn't confronted them sooner, my voice wavered. "Because women my age are taught to keep the peace," I said. even when it costs us everything. There was a murmur in the room. Aaron finally looked at me then. His eyes were full of something like disbelief. Like he still couldn't understand how I had become the one holding the power. The defense attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, emotional, confused. I met his gaze and spoke steadily. I was careful, I said. I was quiet. That's not the same thing. When it was over, I stepped down from the stand and walked past Melissa without stopping. Outside, the sun was bright, almost cruel in its normalcy. Rebecca joined me on the steps. "You did well," she said. I nodded, exhausted. That evening, I returned to my cottage and poured a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't open. News alerts, speculation. I turned it off. Later that night, as I sat in the quiet, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had done its job. It had moved me, protected me, fueled me. Now there was something else in its place. Resolve. Because no matter how this ended for Aaron or Melissa, one thing was already decided. They would never again tell my story for me. And the final chapter of this one was approaching faster than any of us expected. The verdict didn't come when anyone expected it. That waiting was its own kind of punishment. Weeks passed after my testimony. Summer deepened around the cottage, the air thick with cicadas and heat. Life kept moving in small, ordinary ways. I watered the porch plants every morning. I learned the names of birds I had never bothered to notice before. I cooked for one, ate when I was hungry, slept when I was tired, and still, every unknown number made my stomach tighten. Melissa stopped calling entirely. That hurt more than her shouting ever had. Silence from a child is not peaceful. It is heavy, unresolved, like a door left half open in a storm. Rebecca kept me informed without dramatics. "They're negotiating," she said one afternoon. "The evidence is strong." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Aaron is trying to trade information for leniency." I closed my eyes. Information. That word echoed uncomfortably. Information always has collateral damage. 2 days later, Rebecca called again. This time, her voice was sharper. "He's named names," she said, "including someone you know." My breath caught. "Who?" "Melissa," she said. "Not for the financial crimes. For obstruction." The world seemed to tilt. Apparently, during the early stages of the investigation, Melissa had provided statements minimizing Aaron's actions. Emails surfaced, texts, coordinated language, attempts to redirect blame toward unnamed third parties, toward me. "They're considering charges," Rebecca said carefully, "or a plea." I sank into the chair by the window, the light too bright all at once. "I never wanted this," I whispered. Rebecca didn't argue. "I know. But intent doesn't erase consequence." That night, I didn't sleep. I replayed every moment of Melissa's childhood. Her scraped knees, her late-night tears over homework, the way she used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, certain I could stop the sky from falling. Where had that girl gone? Or had she always been there, waiting for permission to choose herself over me? The next morning, Melissa showed up, without warning. She looked exhausted. Hair pulled back hastily, eyes red and rimmed with something like panic. "They're charging me," she said the moment she stepped inside. I didn't move. "You have to help me," she continued, voice breaking. "They say I lied, that I interfered." I studied her carefully, not as a mother, as a witness. "Did you?" I asked. She hesitated, just long enough. "I was trying to protect my family," she said. I nodded slowly. That answer tells me everything. She collapsed into the chair, sobbing. "I didn't think it would go this far." "You thought it would go far enough to benefit you," I replied quietly. She looked up, eyes wild. "You're enjoying this." The accusation stung. "No," I said. "I'm surviving it." She reached for my hand. I pulled back. "Mom, please," she begged. "Say something, anything, on my behalf." I stood then, my knees steady, my voice even. "I spent years saying things on your behalf," I said. "I'm done." She stared at me like I had struck her. As she left, slamming the door behind her, something inside me fractured and healed at the same time. Love does not mean immunity. That truth settled deep. And as the legal storm gathered strength, I understood that the final reckoning would not be public. It would be private, and it would be devastating. The plea deal was announced on a Friday afternoon. Aaron accepted full responsibility in exchange for reduced sentencing. Financial restitution. A ban from holding fiduciary roles. No admission of remorse, only compliance. Melissa was offered a choice: cooperate fully or face charges. She chose to cooperate. Rebecca told me this over the phone, her voice professional, neutral. "You're not implicated," she said. "Your name is clear." Clear. The word felt strange after months of being spoken like a liability. That evening, Melissa called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was thin, stripped of performance. "I told them everything," she said. "About the documents, about the pressure, about what we did." "We." She paused. "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued. I needed you to know." I deleted the message without replying. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. The next week, the news cycle moved on. Another scandal replaced ours. Another family exposed, dissected, forgotten. I remained. I took a trip alone to the coast, renting a small place with no connection to my past. I walked the beach at dawn, letting cold water numb my ankles, my thoughts. One morning, sitting on the sand with a thermos of coffee, I realized something quietly profound. I was no longer waiting for this to end. It already had. The confrontation, the exposure, the legal fallout. Those were events. The transformation was internal. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The line where I stopped negotiating my worth. When I returned to the cottage, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. Melissa's. I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer with the others. Not destroyed, not resolved. Contain. That night, I sat on the porch as the sun slipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors I had never taken time to name. I thought about revenge. It hadn't looked like rage. It hadn't looked like punishment. It had looked like truth, delivered calmly, and allowed to do its work. And as the darkness settled, I understood the final twist of all. They thought they were rewriting my life. Instead, they reminded me how to author it myself. And in that knowledge, I felt something rare and steady. Power. Quiet. Earned. Unyielding. The ending was close now. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally was. After everything settled, what surprised me most was not the quiet. It was how loud my own thoughts became, once no one else was rewriting them. The legal consequences unfolded without spectacle. Aaron received his sentence quietly, efficiently, like a man being removed from a system he had assumed would always protect him. Melissa avoided prison, but lost something far more destabilizing. Her reputation, her certainty, the invisible safety net she had mistaken for entitlement. People stopped calling me with concern and started calling me with curiosity. "How did you know?" one woman from my old volunteer group asked over coffee. "I paid attention," I said. They nodded like that was wisdom, not survival. Rebecca and I met one last time, in our office by the river. She slid a folder across the desk. "Everything's finalized," she said. "Your assets are secure. Your name is clean." I didn't open it. "Thank you," I said, "for seeing me." She smiled softly. "You never needed saving. You needed space." That stayed with me. I resigned from the historical foundation on my own terms, not out of bitterness, but clarity. I joined a smaller local board focused on community housing for older women. Women who had worked their whole lives, only to find themselves sidelined once they stopped being useful. I recognized them instantly, in the mirror, in conversation, in the way they apologized before speaking. I didn't tell them my whole story. I didn't need to. I showed them something else instead, what it looked like to take up space calmly. Melissa sent one final message in late autumn. "I hope one day we can talk. I'm trying to understand who I am without lies." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I replied with one sentence. "I hope you learn without standing on someone else." She didn't respond. And that was all right. I had learned something important over the past year. Closure is not something other people give you. It is something you grant yourself when you stop waiting. As winter approached, I decorated my cottage simply. A small wreath, candles, no forced cheer, just warmth. On Thanksgiving, I cooked for friends I had chosen. Women who laughed easily, who spoke honestly, who did not confuse love with obligation. When we raised our glasses, someone asked what I was grateful for. I answered without hesitation, my own voice. The morning I realized the story was truly over, nothing dramatic happened. No phone call, no letter, no final confrontation. Just a moment. I was walking along the mountain trail behind my cottage, frost crunching softly under my boots. The trees were bare now, honest in their simplicity. No leaves to hide behind, no excess. I stopped halfway up the ridge and looked out over the valley. For years, I had lived braced for impact, anticipating needs, managing emotions, preparing for disappointment before it arrived. I wasn't braced anymore. That was the difference. I thought about the woman I had been at the beginning of this story. The one standing on the back staircase, holding clean towels, overhearing her own erasure spoken like a convenience. I wished I could reach back and tell her something. Not to be stronger, not to be angrier, just to listen to the quiet alarm going off inside her chest and trust it. Revenge, I learned, is often misunderstood. It is not about destruction. It is about refusal. Refusing to disappear, refusing to explain, refusing to shrink. My life now was not flashy. No mansion, no dramatic victories, but it was mine. I chose my days, I chose my people. I chose what I gave and what I withheld. And that choice changed everything. If you are listening to this story and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that sense that something is being taken from you, slowly, quietly, under the name of love or family, hear this. You are not imagining it. You are not too late. And you are not powerless. Sometimes the most satisfying karma is not what happens to them. It is who you become when you finally choose yourself. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to like it, share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about justice, betrayal, and women who reclaim their lives on their own terms. Because your story does not end where someone else decides it should.